Hello, welcome to NF Sports Talk. I'm Noah Foster and I'm happy to be here with you today. This is a place where sports fans can come together and talk about their knowledge and interests in a fun and exciting way. I'll be kicking the channel off with college basketball, team previews, and transfer portal updates, starting with the University of New Hampshire. The University of New Hampshire had a very successful season last year. They were 16 and 15 overall, 7 and 9 in their conference, and that was good enough to earn them the 4th seed in the American East Conference tournament, where they lost in the semifinals to Vermont 66 to 59 in a heartbreaker. They were 2 wins away from making March Madness, and that was a pretty successful season given the fact that their coach, Nathan Davis, it was his first season with the team after he spent 8 seasons with the University of Bucknell. He's a pretty successful coach with a career record of 147 wins and 139 losses, and he's a very experienced coach with multiple March Madness appearances. If you're unfamiliar with the rule changes that took place in college sports, it used to be that if you transfer schools, you would have to sit out for an entire season before playing for that school. And in 2021, the rules changed where if you transfer schools, that you don't have to sit out at all. You can play the following season. And it used to be that barely anybody would transfer schools, and it was pretty big if you could land a big time transfer, because they would have to sit out for a whole season, which is sacrificing a lot. And now players can kind of do whatever they want. You can transfer for money, more playing time, get your name out there, anything. But so many players are doing it now, and it's completely changed the landscape of college basketball. UNH is no exception to these rule changes. And this season they landed 7 new transfers from the portal, which is pretty much taking up the majority of their roster. And most of the players are playing heavy minutes so far this season. They landed Sammy Pisses. He's a junior guard. They landed Jawari Hemlin. He's a junior forward. They landed Dylan Saunders, who's a sophomore forward. Anthony McComb III. He's a junior, and he's also a guard. And they landed Giancarlo Bastioni. He's a senior. Emmanuel Okpomo, who's a senior center, and Dominic Malvi, who's a sophomore. With the current landscape of college basketball, with NIL deals and transfer portals and team players changing teams left, right, center, everywhere, it's no surprise that UNH lost a majority of their team from last year. In fact, they lost 9 players, 3 to graduation and another 6 to the transfer portal. They also lost their top 3 scorers from last season, with their biggest loss being Clarence Daniels, who averaged 19.4 points per game and 9.6 rebounds per game, which both led the team. And they also lost their starting point guard, Ahmed Robinson, who averaged 15.4 points per game, 4.6 rebounds per game, and 4.7 assists per game. And then also they lost their leader, Jackson Baker. He was an 1,000-point scorer with the team and averaged 11.7 points per game and 6.6 rebounds per game. So losing all 3 of those players was huge for the team. UNH didn't lose all of their players from last season's team. They were able to retain 3 players from last season's team. And when I spoke to head coach Nathan Davis, he expressed optimism that those 3 players would be high-impact players this season. So far, he's been right. The first returner is Trey Woodyard. He's a senior guard, and so far in about 26 minutes per game this season, he's averaging 6.3 points, 3.7 rebounds, and about 2.8 assists per game. Another returner is Rex Sunderland. He's a junior, and so far this season in about 25 minutes per game, he's averaging 6 points, 3.2 rebounds, and 2.9 assists per game. And the third returner, a sophomore forward, Davide Poser. He's averaging about 27.1 minutes per game, and in those minutes he's averaging 6.7 points, 2.5 rebounds, and about 1.5 assists per game. UNH didn't build the rest of their team with just transfers, though. They were able to recruit 5 new freshmen to the team. The first one is Caleb Middleton, and he's played about 14.4 minutes per game so far this season. And in those minutes, he's averaging about 5.3 points, 3.6 rebounds, and 0.5 assists per game. Another freshman is Khalil Badru, and he's played about 12 and a half minutes per game so far this season. And in those minutes, he's averaging 4.3 points, 2.6 rebounds, and 0.4 assists per game. Third freshman that they recruited is Antoni Siruk. He's playing about 7.3 minutes per game right now and averaging 3.3 points, 1.1 rebounds, and 0.2 assists per game. And the fourth freshman is John O'Neill, and at about 9.4 minutes per game so far this season, he's averaging 2.4 points per game, 2.2 rebounds per game, and 0.4 assists per game. And then the fifth and final freshman is Nicholas Sanford, and he's yet to check in so far this season, but I'm sure he has a bright future ahead of him. I was lucky enough to speak with Coach Nathan Davis about the returners and the freshmen, not only the transfer portal, and he expressed a lot of positives about the freshmen and the returners for this season that he was happy to share. Is it like a normal conversation now to discuss like their future in the transfer portal, like if they're planning to stay, or is it just like an expectation?
It doesn't come up a whole lot. I've actually debated at times with people if we should recruit guys and tell them that, we'll help you become as good as you can in 2 or 3 years and then help you go somewhere else if you want to go to a higher level. It's not gotten to that point. I just think it's something Joe knows a possibility is going to happen. Mm-hmm. And so you prepare the best you can for it without sitting around all day going, what's he going to, and how's it, but you worry about this team this year and you figure out next year at the end.
Yeah, how important are the returners now? Because there's just, there's not that many of them, and how, can they impact the team?
Well, I think the thing that we, and I think everyone is trying to figure out is how do you keep continuity, which is a challenge.
Yeah.
I think that's a big challenge. How do you keep continuity? One advantage, especially if you get into a new situation, is you can turn a roster over really quick and become much more competitive very quickly because you don't necessarily need 2 or 3 years if you can get the right guys. But you're not going to see as many guys come up through it that are going to go from freshman to senior year. I think that's going to become, especially at a mid and low major, it's going to become much more irregular to see that happen.
Yeah, because they're going to try and play and then maybe go up if possible.
And they're going to try and get NIL deals and you can't compete. You can. I think everyone needs some form of NIL.
Yeah.
It's so much to try to keep guys because you want it to be uncomfortable to leave. But at the end of the day, if you've got a player that's an all-league player as a sophomore and St. John's wants to give him $200,000, you're not competing with that. There's just no way around it. Yeah. Can you make it so he doesn't go to Hofstra for $50? Maybe.
Yeah. I was lucky enough to speak with head coach Nathan Davis about the transfer portal, how he navigates it, what his thoughts are about it, what he has to do to help try and coach a team around it. And before, I'd like to go one by one and go through the players, each player that UNH got in the transfer portal. I thought it would be interesting to hear a few thoughts from the head coach about how he builds a team, what he looks for, and just everything involved with the transfer portal. How does it work for you in the off season? Do you wait till your season ends and then you start looking at players potentially?
Off season.
Yeah.
For coaches, that's the hardest part.
Yeah.
Is that it used to be when you were dealing so much with high school guys that you would get into May and even June and late April and you'd kind of be done recruiting. And now it's not.
Yeah.
You can maybe anywhere from 2 or 3 to 10 in April. And so there's no break.
Yeah.
And I think that's you look at guys like Tony Bennett and that's part of the issue is that you just don't have any downtime. Literally, I'll take it as last year we had a huge roster turnover. We brought in 8 in April and May. You finish that in the middle of May, and then they all come back in June, and they're here till August. And so there's really not a point where you get to catch your breath, and that's draining.
Yeah, I guess I've heard like people like saying it's almost created like a free agency.
100%.
Would you think that's accurate?
It's 100%. It's a free agency with no rules, 100%.
Do you think it's good or bad for the sport of college basketball?
Well, let me say, I first off don't think it matters. What I think is what it is right now.
All right, yeah.
I think we need rules.
Okay.
I think we need rules. I think the student athletes need rules. I think the coaches need rules. I think everyone needs rules because right now there are no rules, and it's a, for lack of a better word, it's a shit show in this spring. Like it's just there needs to be rules, and the rules need to be enforced.
Are there any rules in particular that you like have in mind that you would like to see implemented at some point?
Yes. I think the biggest challenge right now, and this is where it is are they treated as professionals? Is there collective bargaining? I think that's, I don't know that I think a lot of people don't want that. I'm not sure there's a way around it, to be honest with you. With the way the courts are currently are ruling on cases, I don't know there's a way around it. I think that's messier than people think it is. And there's a lot of different things that go into it, but I think there's got to be some sort of rules about recruiting players off other rosters when they're there. Because we shouldn't have guys getting calls on the bus after games.
Yeah.
Like that should not happen.
No.
That should be, and there should be a major penalty if you're doing that.
Yeah, like tampering almost.
There should be a time period where I think people have to make up their minds, and it shouldn't be 8 weeks. I think some of that's changed a little bit. I don't see, and I don't see a lot of answers without collective bargaining in the current landscape. At least in football and men's basketball, and I think in extension women's basketball. But I just don't. I've been trying to wrap my head around one for a while, and I can't come up with one.
Teams have been like calling your players when you're on the bus. So when I said earlier about the whole like they're comparing it to a free agency thing, you think it might honestly be better if they like almost made it like that? Like there's a time period that you can like recruit in?
Well, there is. So like the rule currently is they can't talk to players until they enter the transfer portal.
Okay, like
right?
officially.
People don't abide by that.
Yeah. Like on
they do second parties, some of them are so blatant they do it themselves, but people don't abide by that. And there needs to be some sort of oversight and rules for that. Like your high school coach or AAU coach shouldn't be reaching out to a player saying, I just talked to so-and-so, they got a spot for you. Like that should not be happening.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
That should not be happening. But there's no rules, and it is. There's rules for college coaches doing it, but they're hard to enforce, and they aren't enforced. And so college coaches will call when they're not supposed to call.
Yeah.
And there's nothing enforceable about it. And people look the other way. And so I think that's the number one issue right now. The other issue I think that you have and why you need rules and like some sort of data system where you actually know is kids with the NIL are getting promised money and they're not getting it.
Yeah. That happened in the football.
It happens all the time. Like people are being told they're going to get $500,000, they're getting 50, and there needs to be a legitimate like tracking of what people are getting and what's real and what's not, so that the student athletes know also.
Yeah.
Because it's not. Sometimes they'll go places where if they'd known what they're actually going to get, they wouldn't have left because it wouldn't have been as good a situation, or are they going somewhere else? So, like I said, it's the Wild Wild West.
Yeah,
no one knows what's going on.
Because people are being like promised money just to get them to go to a school, and then they don't actually pay them.
No one knows what's going on. There's no accountability for it. There's no rules for it. There's got to be something.
Yeah.
Now that we know a little bit more how Nathan Davis thinks of the portal and how he works around it and uses it and what his thoughts are about it, and overall just now that we've learned a little bit more about the transfer portal, it's time to meet the players that he recruited to play for the team through the portal And starting off with Giancarlo Bastioni. He's a senior. He's a 6'7" forward from the Dominican Republic. And he transferred from the University of Northern Georgia. He was a very successful high school player, and he was named second team All-Region in Georgia. And then he played for the Dominican Republic team in the past, their national team, which is a very good accomplishment. And Dominic Malvey, he's a sophomore. He transferred over from Franklin Pierce University from last season. Both of these players haven't really made a name for themselves yet this season, which is why I grouped them together. They were recruited to the team more for depth purposes, and should keep their roles like that throughout the season. But every addition to the team is an important addition, and depth pieces can't be overlooked, because if there's any injuries to the starters or the bench players above them, they'll slide right into their minutes. So these players are just as important. The next two transfers that I'd like to introduce are Jawari Hemlin and Emmanuel Okpomo. Jawari is a 6'2" point guard from Westerly, Rhode Island. He joins UNH from Monroe College, where he spent his first 2 seasons. He played in 53 games for the team and started 48 of the games, and had a great sophomore season last year, averaging 12.6 points per game, 3.7 rebounds, and 3.5 assists per game. And he's had a decent start to the season so far for UNH. In 17 minutes per game, he's averaging 3.9 points, 2 rebounds, and 2.3 assists per game. And Emmanuel Okpomo, he's a 6'9" grad transfer forward from Nigeria. He's played at multiple schools before UNH. He played 1 season at Wake Forest, and he played for Temple most recently before transferring to UNH. He played 45 games for Temple, and before he even went to college, he played for Oak Hill Academy, which is one of the best high school teams in the country. They produced multiple NBA talents such as Zion Williamson, and it's one of the best high school programs. So he's played a lot of high-level basketball. He's an upperclassman. He knows the ropes. He's going to be a pretty high-impact player at UNH, and when he played for Wake Forest, he led the team in blocks. So he's going to be a very active defensive player this season. This year for UNH, he's playing about 15 minutes per game and averaging about 3.5 points, 4.4 rebounds, and 0.2 assists per game. But his value isn't just on his stats. He's been through countless situations playing college basketball for 5 years now, and he's seen a lot, and he can help a lot of the young players grow. I grouped these two together because they both have similar roles. They play off the bench, but they still get decent minutes, honestly, for bench players in college basketball. 15 to the 18-minute mark is pretty solid for bench players, and they're going to be pretty high-impact players for UNH this season. Another transfer that I'd like to talk about is Dylan Saunders. He's a sophomore forward. Before he transferred to UNH, he spent his freshman season at the University of Iona. He appeared in all 21 games for Iona, compiling a total of 206 minutes played, and he averaged about 10 minutes per game. And in those 10 minutes, he averaged about 3.1 points, 1 rebound, and 0.2 assists per game. But since he's transferred to UNH, he's gone up in all of those categories. And he now averages about 18.1 minutes per game so far with the Wildcats. And in those 18 minutes, he averages about 4.9 points per game, 2.1 rebounds per game, and 0.4 assists per game. He's been a nice addition to the team. Just like most players, he does a little bit of everything. He's kind of a scrappier player, and Mr. Davis is excited to have him join the team. The last two transfers that I would like to talk about are Sammy Pizzes and Anthony McComb III. Sammy is a 6'3" point guard from Paris, and he won a national championship with France in 2018, which is a pretty cool accomplishment. He played his freshman season at Southeastern Louisiana, where he averaged 6.8 points per game, 1.7 rebounds, and 1.4 assists. But then after that, he went to a junior college, Chipola College, which is actually ranked in the top 100 for junior colleges nationally for basketball, which is pretty cool. And he started 18 of 19 games for them last year, averaging about 12 points per game for the team. And so far, he's been a perfect fit for UNH. He's been their second leading scorer so far, and he's been doing a little bit of everything. He's been averaging so far in 22 minutes per game. He's averaging 10.6 points, 3.8 rebounds, and 2.9 assists per game. And like I said, he kind of does everything. He's a little bit of an all-around player. He's a good number one guard, and he pairs well with the other transfer that I'm about to talk about, Anthony McComb III. He's been the best or the most successful transfer so far this season for UNH. And he came from Bowling Green, where he spent his first 2 seasons, so he's a junior. He's a 6'3" guard, so he's got decent size. He plays the shooting guard, and so he only averaged 2 points per game at Bowling Green his first 2 seasons, and only appeared in 12 games last year and 21 his freshman year. But so far at UNH, it's been a perfect fit. He's been their leading scorer, like I said earlier, and he's averaging in 29.7 minutes per game, 14.9 points, 4.1 rebounds, and 1.4 assists. And he actually had the UNH season high in points on the 6th of November, getting 26 versus UMass Boston. McComb, it's just been a success story so far. He's gone from averaging 2 points to averaging 15 about per game. He's been by far the best transfer that UNH has had so far this season. And Nathan Davis was extremely excited to have him on the team as a player. He's a very hardworking guy. With this video mostly being about the transfer portal and how it's impacted UNH so far this season, and videos in the future, we'll be expanding on other teams' transfer classes for this season and how they've looked so far as we start to get into conference play once we get past Christmas and all that stuff coming up. I think it was pretty interesting to hear from the head coach of UNH about his thoughts on the transfer portal and the perspective that he was able to offer on it all. I think the most interesting takeaway that I got from it is that other coaches just aren't really respecting the rules, and it kind of seems like it's a free-for-all right now. Mr. Davis told me that other coaches were contacting his players on the bus just back from games in the middle of the season, which is honestly, I'd never have heard of anything like that happening. I thought there would just be more, disputes over NIL earnings and money problems, and I guess I was right about that, as I learned that some players just aren't getting paid as much as they were promised, which is a whole nother story for a whole nother day. But getting back to the transfer portal, from talking with Mr. Davis, it's clear that the NCAA needs to establish a new set of rules surrounding it. I don't know what those rules exactly could be, but for starters, I think they should start to crack down on coaches recruiting players in season when they're not supposed to. And I know in the NBA, the NFL, they call it tampering. You're not allowed to talk to players when they're under contract. I guess it's not the same thing because they're not under contract with the schools. But it's a whole big mess that definitely needs to be dealt with. And I think from talking with Mr. Davis, for starters, the first rules that they should start to figure out is kind of a time period maybe. I talked to him about the transfer portal being a almost free agency period, and I think if they just embraced it as a free agency, if they're gonna put rules where you don't have to sit out, it's pretty much a free agency. So I think establishing some kind of date or whatever of when coaches can talk to players and when they can't definitely needs to be established, as it seems like maybe some coaches aren't really sure what to do and don't want to kind of get taken advantage by other coaches, and then it seems like some other coaches just don't really care and will just kind of recruit whenever, wherever. I guess that is probably more in the bigger name schools where that's happening, but then it's kind of a domino effect back to the smaller schools who get the players that maybe the bigger schools aren't as interested in. There's so many points you can go off of talking about the transfer portal, but I think as of now, just establishing rules is kind of just the main focus because it is still new. We're only in year 3 or 4 of the new rules, and we're starting to get past the players going through COVID seasons, so the age will start to go down a little bit. There will be less and less fifth-year seniors. But I think it was really interesting to talk about relationships with Mr. Davis. The transfer portal has taken out a lot of relationships in college basketball, which was a main thing about it. Over the years, you would go as a boy, as an 18-year-old, and you'd grow as a player year in, and then you'd be ready to go after your 4 years. But now they go for 1 year, and if they have any success, they're off to the next school for more money. And I don't even blame them. They aren't even always after money. It can be more exposure, anything. But the players are just doing what's best for them at the end of the day. And I thought Mr. Davis had a pretty good quote. There's nothing you can really do about the transfer portal at this point. You just kind of got to embrace it and work around it. And I think if they establish some sort of rules around the transfer portal, it could definitely be less, I don't know, of a drama point in sports or anything. And yeah, honestly, I think the transfer portal is evolved college basketball and completely changed it forever. And it's interesting to look at all these different teams and how they've kind of attacked the portal and how different coaches attack the portal in different ways. And yeah, I don't know. I'm just excited to learn more about the transfer portal, as you can never stop learning about it. As Mr. Davis said, he's always recruiting, he's always scouting, he's always doing something. It's like it's a 24/7 thing at this point. You got to be on top of it, or another college or another team is going to be on it. And I love to hear the perspective of coaches from other teams around the American East, what they do, and just different coaches and players across the country, how they're adapting to it, how their coaching styles change, how their recruiting styles change. And I was even curious if Mr. Davis just talked to freshmen about, hey, are your plans to stay here or are they to leave in the future? He said he doesn't do that, but I'm sure other coaches do talk about it, because he did say that he thought about doing it at some point. And if you're here still watching this video, I'd like to thank you for sticking with me. It's my first video. Definitely got some stuff to work out, and I'd appreciate any suggestions that people would have. I mean, I'm obviously a big college basketball fan. I go to UNH. I'm a UConn basketball fan, but yeah, I'm open to doing other sports too, and not just college, professional sports. Any suggestions that you might have, I'd love to hear. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a nice night.